just tell me when you want me to start?
Well, we should probably do a little introduction. Yeah, I don't have a set intro, but thanks everybody for tuning in to the Tavern podcast. So this was my friend Brian sent me a text maybe a month or so ago, and he was like, "Man, you got to do a Tavern podcast. Like, so many great artists coming through there. And they all have So I guess the cat got in anyway."
He's gonna be a part.
Yeah,
of
he's
this.
just gonna be a part of this. Yep, that's the way it's gonna go. So and he was like, "So many great artists coming through. You got to just do interviews with everybody." So I did an interview with Brian. I interviewed Brian last week, right? And then Brian was like, "Well, the first one should probably be an interview of me," So and then we talked about having our incredible neighbor Catherine, who lives right across the street, come over and do this interview.
I have the incredible neighbor.
Oh man. Yeah, but Catherine's been here. You've been at like every single event we've ever had, just about.
Just about.
I think maybe the only one you missed is when you had to go get the chickens from in the middle of the street, right?
It's true.
Yeah.
That was a move.
Yep. So, yeah.
Well, I have some questions for you, Peyton, and I'm going to start off with your vision, because when I first met you, I was curious about what you were talking about doing over here.
Yeah.
And so I'd really like to know what your vision is for the Tavern going forward.
Yeah. Well, so the long range vision is to create a research center. That's what I've been calling it for a little while, and the more that I think about it, the more that's the thing that really kind of sums it up to me, is trying to create a research center that is mostly focused on music, and then is also integrating metaphysics and the healing arts into this, creating a space where musicians are going to get to come together and talk to astrologers and talk to acupuncturists and talk to people who practice massage and stuff like this, and look at the relationships between all of these different things, and have a space where we can not just get together and talk, but actually get together and like study the things together, to have like a dedicated space where we can come together and really study the intersection of all these different things. How does astrology play into music? Like, how can we use astrology to really change the way that we're playing music, change the pitches and the rhythms that we're choosing, right? Because the astrology is changing moment to moment.
It does.
So how can we come up with different systems of expressing that musically, and then how can we use that in a like specific healing modality, so also having the space where people, like audience people, can come in, and they can come and experience some of these things that are happening. It's a place for research, a place where we can really like experiment with all these different things.
So you really see people participating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you have to have that, because it's just theory if you don't have anybody participating, right? It's just this sort of, it's a cool idea, but none of it really makes a difference until you can actually like get down and practice the stuff and try it out, So to be able to come up with a different technique for maybe delivering music, or different techniques of putting music together that have a certain intention, towards the way that they're going to affect somebody, and then being able to try it out, because you got to be able to try it out and say, well, yeah, actually that didn't work at all,
When I first met you, I thought, well, he's so young. Okay, so tell me where you want to be here 10 years from now. What do you
Oh,
man. What do you see?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, I see, because there is enough open space here, I see that open space being used to agriculturally support the people who are staying here, you know. I see having maybe 3-4 people total in the main house that are like really permanent, that are consistent, you know, and that are really focused on this sort of like a unified research project, you know, and the details of that I think are just going to become more clear over time, you know. But to me, the things of that are studying the relationship of astrology to music, you know, studying how we can express the astrology of the moment through sound, studying how you could express somebody's natal astrology, right? Somebody's like birth chart, their natal horoscope. How could you express that through sound? How could you use that as like a healing modality for people, you know? Studying different ways that these things are going to interact with the human body, you know, studying things like electricity in the human body, studying, you know, like studying some of these like ancient metaphysical ideas that relate to the human body, the things like the chakra system or the dantian, stuff like this. This is talking about something that is basic to the human body and is, you know, has a great effect on people's energetic states, you know. So trying to understand more about that, but in a practical way, you know, really trying to understand how do these actually work and how can we really engage with them through sound, you know.
I know one of the things that I was very curious about, and I've asked you some questions about it, is how you got started in this. And I was really kind of shocked when you told me what you did, and I think everybody would like to hear that. It was very interesting.
Yeah, so my mentor was Milford Graves, and he was a drummer. He's born in 1941, in the summer of 1941. He was a drummer, and then, I mean, he was a polymath, really. He was an acupuncturist. He was an herbalist. He was a martial artist. He invented his own style of martial arts that he would teach out of his basement or out of his detached garage in the back for like 20 or 30 years, you know. And then when he got to be like 58, he decided he was going to really seriously study cardiology. So he was like studying cardiology at a medical level, and really trying to understand the relationship of music and cardiology, the relationship of drumming to cardiology, you know. And he was really interested in, you know, basically the things that I'm talking about too, right? Which is like playing music for somebody and seeing how it affects them physically, you know. So, and there's so many different ways that you could look at that, right?
Oh,
You
yes.
know, there's so many, because especially now we have so many different techniques of like medical monitoring, you know. There's so many different ways you can, you could look at the sound of somebody's heart, you could take somebody's EKG, you can, you know, can do pulse diagnosis, all of these different methods that we have to try and understand how it really affects somebody, you know. So, and you know, Milford was really, really interested in that, and he was really studying that at a high level.
I don't think I know anything that affects humans more than music, you know. And like when I think about astrology, it's on a different level, but music, I mean, people are profoundly impacted by music and different kinds of music. And so do you ever foresee products here? I know you're talking about agricultural things. Do you see like gardens here, food?
Yeah, definitely. I see building a really serious garden here, you know. And that's because that's part of the whole study to me, you know. It's not just like, grow our own food. You know, there's a side of it of like grow our own food so we don't have to go to the grocery store, so we don't have to be reliant on, you know, outside sources in the same way. You know, but there's a huge part of it that's just, this is also a part of the whole study, you know. To me, these things are all related, you know.
They are connected.
There's such a major question to me, and you know, Brian and I have talked about this stuff at length, but there's such a major question about, like, you know, why are certain plants available to us to harvest at certain times, you know, and what does that plant being ready to harvest at that particular time tell us about that time, you know? This becomes to me an astrology question in a way, right?
Yeah, yes,
you know,
it is.
why is it that this plant is available at this time? What is it about this time that like resonates with the energy of this particular plant, of this particular food plant, you know? And then how can we discover what that is, right? What are all of the different techniques and methods we could use to try and understand what that is? Well, we can look at the astrology, and we can look at the astrology from a lot of different perspectives, right? We could look at the Western astrology of the moment. We could look at simply what's happening with the sun cycle, what's happening with the sun and the moon cycle, the lunation cycle, right? What's happening with some of the other planets in the sky, you know? And then you can get into questions about why is this plant more abundant certain years or less abundant other years, or it has a certain, you know, tendency to be more this way or more that way, you know. And yeah, this is all about like what's in the soil and the nature of the land and all of this, but this still seems to me to be a reflection of something larger that's happening, you know. You could look at other cycles of astrology too, right? The Chinese have another cycle of astrology, right? The I Ching was made, it seems to be that was originally a calendar, you know, and it's telling you about a cycle of energetic dynamics that happens, you know. So how can we understand the way that each of these like archetypal symbols is signaling a certain moment or describing a certain moment, and then how is that particular plant expressing that moment? You know, and then you go and you eat the plant too, right? So eating the plant is a certain experience. That is like a very visceral experience.
It is.
Of the product of that moment, you know. You eat the apple, right? Everybody eats an apple and they think fall time, especially here. Fall time in the Hudson Valley.
It's
wow.
true.
Tastes like apples and apple cider and all that. So what does that flavor on a deeper level really tell you about that moment in time? You know, how is, because you're having this strong, like, kind of nostalgic sort of reaction to it. So obviously there's something there. There's something particular about that moment. There's something particular about that taste, you know, that's associated with that moment. So how can we understand that on a more kind of fundamental, energetic kind of level, you know? So, and then in a way, it's not as much to me about product as it is just about really trying to get a handle on that, you know, and then bringing that in here, right? If you really know what the apple tastes like, and then you have this kind of base understanding of why the apple tastes that way, what kind of energy imbued the apple to make it taste this kind of way. And if you really understand the energetic of it, this is the same place that music comes from, really, right? Because music is just these expressions of like different energies.
It's creation.
Yeah, it's creation. So if you can really understand that, then you can play the music from that place, you know.
Yes.
You can play the music using the same energy that went into making the apple in that moment, and you can play that, you know, in the middle of October. And you're probably not going to use that energy to play the music, you know, right around the spring equinox.
That's true.
It's a different time, and it's a different feeling, and it's a different energy.
It is.
So, you know, to me, like as musicians, we need to understand that on a deeper level to offer music to people that makes more sense in a way, you know. that's so much what it comes down to, is just making music that really suits the time, that makes sense for the time.
When you talk about music and healing and health, I do think that music can have a profound impact on that.
Absolutely.
And let's talk about that a little bit,
Mhm.
because I know that that's something that you've envisioned.
Mhm.
And how do you see that playing out here?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I mean, there are already so many examples of like healing through music, and in a lot of different ways. And I think some of the most familiar one, probably the most familiar to us in America, is like Baptist revivals.
That's
Right?
the truth.
Yeah. Right? This is like a large group of people going to a ceremony, and then being, right, essentially like taken by the Holy Spirit is the experience, right? And it's an exorcism in a way. It's like this super cathartic experience with music,
Well, they're taken over.
They're taken over. Exactly.
And,
Exactly.
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 It happens all over this country.
Yeah. Exactly. And the thing is that very thing happens in a lot of different places around the world, right?
Yes, it does.
Because you also see this happening like in Cuba with the Santeria tradition.
Mm-hmm.
You see people go to a toque, they're playing bata drums, so it's a different style of music than we're using here, but it's essentially the same concept and the same process, right? They're playing music in a certain way that conjures up the spirits, or they're playing music from a certain space.
Or like
You know,
Africa.
Exactly.
I mean,
you see the same
profoundly.
thing. You see it in Yoruba land too, right?
Yes, you
see
do.
all of this happening. So, to me, there's like a fundamental thing, and for a long time, I've always been interested in this kind of thing in music, and I've always been interested in playing music from this space anyway,
Mm-hmm.
from this place of like, it's just kind of like an assumption that I take for granted, that people come to music because they're looking for that kind of like spiritual healing, cathartic experience type of thing, so that alone is like a fundamental thing that's going on for me, and I think people are already experiencing that when they come to the tavern and they hear the music here, even the musicians that come here to play, and a lot of people have come here to play that have never been here before, their first time coming is coming here to perform. And a lot of them, the feedback is like, man, I never played like that before.
Or Peyton, the first time I ever heard a sound bath was right here.
Mm-hmm.
And at first
Yeah,
I was like, I
exactly.
wonder what it is.
Yeah.
And it's exactly, the idea of a sound bath is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And there's all different kinds of sounds.
Yep.
And, it's pretty profound. I mean, the first time I heard you and Aiden, and I think I mentioned there was a note that I kept hearing that was very prevalent, and I loved it.
Yeah.
And, but that was the very first time I'd ever been to one.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And that's like the other side of this experience, right? That's kind of the other side of this like cathartic, almost like religious ecstasy type of experience, right? This is like, that's such a, an upper kind of release state. And then the sound bath thing is like really the other side of that. This is the other balance to that, the foil of that, which is like, really like level out your sympathetic nervous system, and really like have that reset thing, And these things to me are like these are just scratching the surface into it, because these things are sort of like, we're just setting a landscape right now. I mean, this is the infancy. I've only been here, 23 months. like
Yeah.
to the day, 23 months, right?
Not long.
It hasn't been that long. So in a way, what we're doing right now is just like setting the landscape, right? We're having
Well, you're in the infancy.
traditional performances where we're coming, and so there's this big thing for me about like having these kind of cathartic experiences with music and really having this like unleash all the energy kind of thing, having the sound baths, having that side of it, and then just starting to explore what that means, but then long range, this is part of why I was so attracted to this space, is because there's so many different spaces in this building, right? We have this larger music room, and there's the lounge here where people can congregate, and then there are all these little rooms upstairs,
Yes.
right? So I don't know if we ever talked about this one, but I had a gig in the summer of 2021 in Brooklyn. It was down at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And this was like a COVID gig. So the gig was playing one-on-one concerts, right? This was still when like everybody had to wear masks and be 6 feet apart in the city, all of this. So they had a bunch of different performers sign up, and it was at the Navy Yard. So one performer would get one room, it's like a warehouse storage room. They're huge.
It's huge.
And you would be in there for like a 2-hour block of time. And they would bring in one audience member at a time. So they would bring in one audience member to walk in, sit down in the chair that was 6 feet away, and you would play a solo concert for them for 10 minutes.
Wow.
And then they would leave, and then they would bring in another person. So you were playing, how, I don't know, it was like 10 minutes on and 10 minutes off. So what, you end up playing like 6 solo concerts for 6 different individuals over the course of 2 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was such a pivotal experience to me, because I was already thinking about like healing with music, and I was getting much more interested in astrology and really trying to understand different individuals, and understand where are they coming from, what's their energetic state, what's their psychological makeup or their blueprint, right? So then to have that experience, so the challenge for me in that gig was like, because you're in this huge room. So it took 20 seconds or so for them to walk from the door over to the chair. So, there's a little bit of time. And the thing to me was like, try and get where this person is just from them walking in the door to the chair. And then improvise from that space, because some people walk and they have a certain kind of rhythm.
They do.
They do. There's a certain sort of thing. So then it was like, try and do that. And that was such a cool experience, just trying to understand it in that way. But then I started thinking about it, and it's like the one thing that gig really missed was a space for everybody involved to congregate afterwards and talk about the experience.
That is true.
Because really, the way that I looked at that, it was, because I look at a lot of things really, it's just like we're just studying. Even if we're performing, we're still studying. You're learning, you're trying to work out musical or otherwise issues, and trying to understand something deeper about this. So, for me in that particular setting, it was such a deep experience, but we kind of missed like half of the learning side of it because you didn't get to talk to anybody else about their experience.
What about the part of it that astrology brings, because each individual is different because of astrology?
Yeah.
And did anybody, did they want to know? Did they ask? Or was there an opportunity to kind of explore some of that?
In that setting, no, there wasn't. But that's just I want to try and continue this thing here at the Tavern, so, and the idea to me is have maybe 10 people come over, in an evening and set it all upstairs, right? Because there are 4 or 5 little rooms upstairs. So make it so that everybody has 10 minutes to go to each of those rooms upstairs, right? And set up, like, one room has a musician in it, and one room has an astrologer in it, and one room has like a tarot reader in it, and one room has an acupuncturist in it, right? Something like this.
Wow.
So then everybody has the same experience of getting like a mini session, which each of these different people, you know, but they're totally individualized. You know, so then they get that thing, and then, you know, they could come downstairs, and there's still like
you.
it's specifically you, but then there's still this space to congregate at the end and talk about, like, what's going on here, you know, what's your experience, like, what's really happening, you know. So all of these things are interesting to me, of, like, you know, have people come in, and have people even have somebody come in with their birth chart to a musician, and to have the musician really understand what's happening in the birth chart, you know, because when people come in for a reading, right, you're just talking about, like, well, you know, Mars in Taurus means this, and having the South Node in Cancer means this, and having Sun and Moon in Sagittarius means this. But it's a different experience if somebody's just expressing those things to you through sound.
It is. And Peyton, have you thought about the possibility of having different types of, I'm not quite sure how to say this, but one of the things that I noticed when I was here one time and you were really talking about astrology, when I started out, I think I said to you it was like speaking a foreign language.
Yeah.
And as I asked questions and you explained more, I began to really understand some of it. And what I'm envisioning is, what if you had kind of like physical examples of what you're talking about? Because if somebody walks in here and they know zero about it, it might be very, very confusing. Whereas if you had some physical examples, I know for me, it was really a shock, and it was profound, because when I left, I felt like I could understand the foreign language you were speaking. And when I came in, I couldn't. And so it just got me thinking more and more about different types of examples that you could provide, so that people could learn more, that this could be a place where people could come in and actually leave and know something more about it. And it was very interesting to me, because there are intersections, as you describe them, where these things touch. And I had a little trouble seeing that in the beginning, but I can envision it more now because of what you explained. And I just found it very, very interesting. And I mean, I don't know what it's going to look like here 10 years from now, but you know, I just thought it's going to be so much farther down the road in terms of what you offer and what people can take away from it. I just think it's fantastic. And I'm sure that you're going to have all kinds of people coming through here, because this particular person might only be interested in one aspect of it. But you're going to have the whole panoply of things here. And so I think that's pretty amazing.
Definitely. I mean, I see one of the major things I see for overtime here is just having more and more crossover between the things, you know, because right now, we're still functioning in a way of, like, there's an astrology forecast night, and we sit down and we talk about astrology, you know, in the way that astrology has been talked about, right?
True.
It's like, it's not really new. We're just, like, familiarizing in a way, right? We're having this experience of doing it, you know. We have concerts here. It's still like concerts. You're coming and you're hearing a band play, you know. And yeah, the music has a slightly different tip to it. You know, there is starting to be a little bit of a sound here, you know, is what I'm noticing. You know, but yeah, long range, like, I see this stuff being just more integrated, right? Not having an astrology night where we just talk about astrology, but having, first step is like being able to do this in a presentation format where you could take like the transits that are going to happen in the month ahead, right? We've been doing the month ahead forecast.
That's true.
Right, and we just talk about,
fabulous.
Right, and we just talk about, okay, so coming up, like we just had hours ago, we just had the new moon in Capricorn, right? It happened at like 7 o'clock this morning. What's today? January 11th. For
That's
everybody
right.
interested, so 7 o'clock this morning we had new moon in Capricorn, and then 2 weeks from now we're gonna have full moon in Leo with the sun in Aquarius, so we've been having astrology forecast night, and we just get around and we talk about that, so next step to me though is like, well, let's have a presentation where those things are actually, they're laid out, maybe we can project onto a screen the actual horoscope and watch everything spin, right, in the speeds and ratios it's going to spin over the course of the month, and then have a sonic element that actually expresses what's going on, so then maybe we can have a balanced thing of like, yeah, we're talking about it, and then you can experience it in a whole other modality, right?
Music.
Yeah, you can experience it through music, and you could experience it through sound, and then that alone could go so much further. You could get into like an installation element, you could make it so that there's actually like a speaker driver that's like it's all actually like on a mobile, right? And one represents Venus and one represents Mars, and they're spinning around, and they're
that's
vibrating.
That's what I'm envisioning.
Yeah.
Like what types of physical examples.
Right, exactly. And then all of a sudden this becomes like, well, maybe we're not doing sound baths anymore. We're just doing come experience the astrology of next month as a sound bath installation.
Oh,
right? Like how wild is that? And you come in and you could lay down on the floor, and it's just this like mobile of speaker drivers that are like all resonating and spinning around in this, in the way that they would be on a horoscope. So you just get this whole other way of experiencing it.
Another thing that I noticed here was that a lot of the folks that come in that actually perform, they kind of express sound, all of them very differently, and in ways that are unexpected. And I don't always understand exactly what they're doing, and I actually felt kind of okay with that, because I've heard a couple of other people say, well, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what you're doing. What are you doing? And that helped me to understand it better when the person was explaining exactly what they were doing. And I really liked it. I thought, wow, this is because everybody is different. And they come in and they all express it differently.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many spaces now today where you can go and hear music and be totally disconnected from the musicians. I mean, this is like the popular format of hearing music, really, now, right? You go to a stadium concert, you go to Lincoln Center,
that is true.
That has like Lincoln Center has the green room. They walk out onto the stage, they play the music, they go home, and you hop in the cab, and that's it.
You're far away from
but the original ways of having music was like everybody in the village got around the campfire, and the people who were initiated to play the instruments played the instruments, but still everybody else was participating in some way. They were clapping, they were singing, they were dancing. All these different things are happening. And there's conversation. There's actually an exchange between the musicians and the people who are receiving the music, And this is wildly important, especially just to like the continuation of music and art. You know, if we're always like keeping ourselves separate from people that are coming to check out the music, like, how are they going to know what you're doing? And if you're trying to do new shit, which, you know, that's something that's extremely interesting to me, and there's the lineage of people being interested in doing new shit musically, you kind of got to tell people what's going on, so that they can, like,
was taking place.
Exactly.
And so I understood better. I liked it. I liked learning about what was happening, and somebody was saying, and that's what this does.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It changes the sound from this to this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that was very interesting to me. And I was probably a little bit shy about asking questions.
Yeah.
But some of the other people weren't.
Yeah.
They were like, well, I've heard this before and I didn't understand this. And it was really a meaningful experience to me, because I went home and I felt like I understood it better.
Yeah.
And it was just cool.
Right.
I really enjoyed it.
Right.
You know. But another thing that I wanted to ask you about was the healing part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do think that music and sound is profoundly healing.
Yeah.
And how do you see some of the people that you bring in kind of getting involved in that aspect of what you want to do, of what you want to achieve here?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there have already been quite a few people who have come here, like, in a musical capacity, who are also practicing the healing arts, right? I mean, Samuel's probably a prime example, right?
He is.
Right? Because Samuel and I have been doing this trio together with Brian. It's mostly just music, you know. But then he's got his healing practice outside of that, right? He has his orthobionomy work, and he, you know, incorporates like the shamanistic element into that. So he's doing that, you know, body work and energy work.
And
right?
he's got a bajillion instruments.
And he's got a bajillion instruments, right?
You know,
right. And he incorporates the sound thing into his healing work, you know. So he's already like living in this crossover sort of thing, you know. And like we were talking about, like using sound as healing, you know. We've started talking about kind of like different methods and different possibilities. And he was saying to me, he's like, man, why don't you get somebody on the massage table and just like lay under the table and play saxophone, like, you know, into their back, right? And try and play, and, you know, and just be real intuitive, like, what does it feel like this person needs, and express that sonically, you know.
And
so we've already started to like
think of doing that.
Yeah.
Samuel.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. You know, and it's like Madeline was here the other night, right? And she's a body worker too, right? She does this. So
and
that's
she utilized sound, a lot of different sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought she had a really beautiful voice.
Yeah.
And really enjoyed the different levels of sound she produced.
Yeah.
Wasn't always sure where she was going with it, but I liked it.
Yeah, so there are already people coming that are like, they have a foot in each world, you know. So, and then to me, it's like, there's just such a fundamental draw for me for like total integration, like really having a grasp, not on each of these things as individuals, you know, not just having a grasp on music, having a grasp on a particular healing modality, but then really like having a grasp on being able to integrate them, being able to kind of like pass seamlessly between the two of them, you know, being able to bring sound really into like a one-on-one healing session, you know. It's like I remember going and hanging out with Onyx Ashanti, and we started talking about some stuff, and, you know, started talking about like, well, what if you could, you know, make like some sort of glove, right, for a massage practitioner, and the glove had like little like transducers or maybe even electrodes built into the fingertips, you know, and then you could dial that in some way to the certain vibrations that you need, you know, the certain frequencies. It's like maybe it needs more than just like mechanical pressure, but
That's
if you had
astonishing.
if you had like an electrical component to this, and then you had a way of working with that, right? It's similar, right?
Yes.
this is all kind of in the same realm. So
Yes.
and that's the thing to me, is like trying to bring those two things together, you know, because you know there is already like a, well, it's not so much, I don't know, it's a tradition in a way, you know, there's a tradition of sound healing, but you know, I think in a lot of ways, like music and healing have still been pretty separate, other than some of these ways that we already talked about with like Baptist revivals, and they're, you know, which are, they're basic in a way, you know.
They are.
They're not very developed,
No.
right? This is one of the things that I'm
pretty
really
rudimentary.
It's pretty rudimentary, exactly. It's pretty rudimentary, you know, and this is not to say that it's not effective. It's extremely effective, and it's beautiful that, you know, there's so much simplicity and so much effectiveness in that. But it's interesting to me, you know, just in the interest of growth and development and study, right, to just try and take this a little further. How can we get more detailed? How can we really dial this in, you know? But I think, you know, there's not so much crossover between music and healing. Most of the people, you know, that have dealt with sound healing are just kind of, they're dealing with sound, but they're not thinking about sound also from the perspective of like the aesthetic array of sounds.
No.
It's more about, I'm doing this sound to try and accomplish this energetic thing. I'm doing this sound to try and accomplish this energetic thing, you know. So, I mean, I remember talking to Steve about this, because Steve gets some stuff from sound healing. He's gotten some ideas from sound healing, you know, but one of the things that he was talking about was like, you know, if you really look at books on sound healing, if you look at any sort of, you know, text or resource from sound healers, they have a totally different value system and just a totally different array of concerns. They're not concerned with like making a smooth transition to the bridge of body and soul, right?
No.
These are totally different concerns with how we're using sound. But to me, there seems to be such a strong relationship still between the way that you make a smooth transition into the bridge of body and soul, and the way that you can, you know, heal somebody or try and express something about these things, because they feel similar to me, right? Making a smooth transition into the bridge of body and soul can have a synonymous feeling to making a smooth transition, right? We're about to head into the transition of Pluto Capricorn to Pluto in Aquarius. You know, so how do you really understand what these two archetypes are about? It's the same thing. It's like you're playing body and soul, and you're in the key of D flat, and then you're trying to get to the key of D. How can you really understand the similarities and differences between these two keys? How can you understand the way that the key of D flat could hinge into the key of D, right? And there are so many methods of making the transition. You could hinge, you could slide, you could do something that has a symmetry to it, you know, that's going to be one key on one side and the other key on the other side, all these certain things. Well, and then how can you kind of graft this understanding onto the relationship or the transition of Capricorn to Aquarius?
Well, one thing that you're describing that I remember, and I remember this because I lived in the South for many years. My husband and I got transferred around, and one of the things that I saw frequently there was the use of music to convert people into religion. So people would say,
yeah,
oh, well, you have to come to our revival, and I was like, what? You know, well, there's going to be music. Well, that was the key word that I heard. So I'd say to my husband, well, we need to go to this thing. They're going to play music. Well, it wasn't about music so much as it was about converting people into a religion, which I'd never seen before, had never experienced before. Ended up thinking it was crazed. Nonetheless, there were a lot of people doing that.
Yeah.
And there were also a lot of examples of, you know, I didn't really know anything about country and Western music.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of that. And people would just kind of pull up by the side of the road.
Yeah.
And they'd start playing music, but it was all country and Western.
Yeah.
And, you know, but I thought frequently Michael and I would have these discussions about how you could use that for something else.
Yeah.
And that's what you're describing here.
Yeah.
A lot of different things that I think it can impact.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love the idea of, you know, electrodes or things that are on different frequencies that could affect your body. Because they can.
Yeah.
And, you know, so kind of studying that and seeing where you can get to sounds pretty interesting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you're seeing so many of these different moments where music is extremely powerful, you know.
They are.
Yeah, there's so many different examples of that, you know. So, and then it's just a question of like trying to think creatively about how you can bring the two things together in different ways, you know. And all of these things are related, you know, music, sound, vibration, electricity,
healing.
Right.
No question.
Right. I mean, it all, like, fundamentally it's just talking about energy, you know, and trying to understand energy at a deeper sort of level, you know. And I think humans have been trying to do this forever. This is why we have things like the I Ching. This is why we have Western astrology, you know, because people were already seeing that, you know, somehow there's this kind of like life energy force.
It's connected.
That connects everything.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, and people were seeing that, like, well, it seems that when this planet is in this place in the sky, it correlates to these types of things happening, you know. There's some sort of like energetic synchronization between the two things, you know. So, and, you know, there's a tradition of trying to understand that deeper over time too, right? You know, you see the way that astrology keeps changing over time. People use it for different things. They come up with different techniques about it, you know. So it's the same thing to me. You see the way that music changes over time. People, you know, discover new techniques that can be used musically to express new times, right? Because the times keep changing, and if the times are changing, that means the energy is changing, you know. So then how can you, right, better express what the time is about?
That is true. Let me ask you this. How do you see yourself attracting like-minded people here? Is it just word of mouth? Is it, you know, do you get out there on the internet and really try to express to people what it is that you're attempting to achieve?
Well, that's happening a little bit right now, right? This conversation is just going to be floating around there in cyberspace, you know.
That's true.
And yeah, I mean, hopefully the right people see it, you know. But it's a lot of word of mouth, you know, and you know, I think word of mouth is a really powerful method when you're like pretty set and pretty specific about what it is you're trying to do, you know. And you know, it's like I've already been working on the music thing for a while, you know, and I've been working on the astrology thing for a while.
Right.
And even trying to put them together is newer to me, but I've been working on that for a couple of years and trying to understand more about the relationships and just trying to make some like intuitive connections and intuitive parallels and express them in different ways. So so the word of mouth thing is like, yeah, people hear about that, I guess.
They do.
People hear
They're
about
very
that,
interested.
and yeah, and there are a lot of people that are like this, especially now. Part of doing all of this is because I really think that this is a symbol of this time. That these ideas are like, in a way, they don't really feel so much like my ideas. They just feel like the ideas of the moment. They feel like the ideas of this time. Because I talk to a lot of people who have the same kind of ideas, and they think the same sort of things, and they feel an attraction towards a lot of these same areas of study, and these same areas of expression. So, so the word of mouth thing is really powerful, and then just getting out on the internet is like, we've been trying to come up with a lot of different ways right now of being able to just release more things, have more music put out there, have more videos of the events put out there and that sort of thing, just to
Do you see yourself getting more involved in like the healing end of it, or the even food production end of it?
Yeah.
I mean, I know you have chickens.
Definitely. Yeah.
And I mean, what other things do you see yourself as like in producing food, like selling it, or?
Probably not selling it. No, I don't think that that's really going to be a part of it. More just like growing food, and whoever's like actually here at the tavern is going to be able to eat all that food, and then we'll cook dinner for like anytime we have a concert. I see it more as that kind of thing, but definitely more involved in the healing side of it. Yeah, definitely more involved in that, because it's again, I think you have to have like, you've got to have practical experience in any of these things that you're talking about doing. It was a long time, well, I don't know about a long time, but it was a while that I was like just at home in the room, like reading the astrology books, and then when I actually started going out and like doing people's charts, this makes so much more sense now. That's when the stuff really starts to come together, and you get such a better handle on that, And it's the same thing with the healing thing, just like doing that and having these practices. So there have been a lot of moments recently of like, I'll do it with people that I'm close to, and people who are like already kind of in this zone, and it's like, hey, can I just experiment? Like John was, what was that, maybe a month ago or something, and John was like wanting to do a session. I was like, can I just try this experimental thing that I've been working on? I'm working with the singing bowls and working with different stones and some different sounds and stuff like that, and he was down, and it's I think we both learned a lot from that experience, and learned a lot of things that maybe are kind of hard to describe too, but you just like, you get the tools and you keep them in the tool belt for a little while, so and that's because I do want to have a place that people could come like as a single person coming for like a healing modality. That is an ultimate intention for here.
And let's face it, it's usually the elders who have really practiced that pass on a lot of that information to others. Because they're experienced. My son was saying to me a couple of weeks ago, "Oh, Catherine, could you ever see yourself butchering chickens?" And I just kind of looked at him, because when the chickens get killed, I cry.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I suppose I could do it, but I'm not sure I'd want to do it.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, then we could raise chickens, and we'd know exactly what they were being fed, and they would be healthier to eat, and could you see yourself in that chain anywhere? And I said, probably. I could probably achieve that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I want to,
Yeah.
but
yeah.
There are aspects to it, yes, that I could.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just trying to think about food production that would be healthier,
Mm-hmm.
and planting more things over here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's going to do that, but
Yeah.
what you're attempting to do, I think, is very healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like when I look up what Samuel does.
Yeah.
And when you go over to his house and you look at his shelves,
Yeah.
and he's got 10,000 remedies there,
Yeah.
and they're all very healthy.
Yeah.
They're not things that are dangerous,
Yeah.
but you think, my God, how much has he studied to get there?
Yeah.
And he knows what to use those things for. That takes a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes a long time to do these things. It's not an overnight thing.
It is not.
Milton said that very specifically.
Did he?
Yeah, he said it's not an overnight thing. I mean, I was just looking back at an old hard drive that had some notes that I was taking, and there was like one particular one, and he was like, you have to get this one anatomy book, you got to get this one for like this particular part of it, but it doesn't give you the whole picture, so you have to kind of fill it in with this book over here, but still you're gonna have to like spend a lot of time and then put it together. It's not an overnight thing.
Do you see, like, some of your roommates are musicians, do you
Mm-hmm.
see them actually giving music lessons to people? Do you see that, or is that not where you're trying to go?
Yeah, I mean, it's because I'm really open-ended. Like people are gonna find their own way with all of this
Like
stuff.
finding a niche.
Yeah, find a niche with it. So I have no opposition to doing that sort of thing. And it's, and that's something that's like kind of interesting to me. But I'm more interested in trying to like put these things together.
Sure.
And studying the intersection of these things. But I think it would be very interesting to get to a point with music when we start understanding it from some of these other perspectives, because I think part of this whole thing is like the way that we understand music now is like it's starting to get a little bit stale.
It is.
It's starting to get a little stale, and I think a lot of people sense this, that most musicians now have been to school, and the music thing is getting like really hyper institutionalized, and they teach music in a certain way. There's this kind of plug and play way of thinking about all of these things.
Yes.
But they're a little bit disconnected when you look at them, So, I think in some ways we are headed towards like another major shift musically,
Mm-hmm.
where it's almost like going back to something in a way, right?
That's
It's
right.
going
You
back
look
to
back
something that's a
and
little
you
more
say,
connected,
when
right?
was it
Yeah,
really
yeah.
profound? And you look
Yeah.
at the 60s and you say,
Yeah.
well, what's happened since then?
Mhm.
And there are shifts,
Yeah,
and there are changes
yeah,
that are occurring.
yeah, absolutely.
And you think, where is it going to go next?
Absolutely. And then I think you can look back even much further than that, and you can look back to archaic
hell
times
yeah.
and try and understand something of the way, the role that music was playing in that time and in those societies
At different times.
Yeah, at different times
Historically, because there are
yeah
really profound moments.
Yeah, and it was definitely, there was another side to it. It was doing something else. So now we're at an interesting moment because we've almost like exhausted our tool building in a way.
Well,
I think
true.
this is kind of like a large idea of this time that people are realizing we've sort of like exhausted our tool
We
building.
ran
but
out
we've
of
also
ideas.
gotten disconnected from something sort of fundamental, some like certain connectedness that comes with the whole thing, some greater reason for doing it, some certain like energetic thing that's going on there, and I think there's like a big push towards that. I'm really like influenced by Terence McKenna, and he talks about the return to archaic values, and he says this is such a big part of our time, and I'm really influenced by Jeff Wolfgreen, and Jeff Wolfgreen talks about similar sorts of things, if we're at this pivotal moment in human history where we're in a way trying to revert to something that once was, but we've gone through this time of getting to build all these other tools, so we're going to be able to bring stronger tools back to, this earlier way of thinking.
And it can come back
existing.
and you can reshape it into something else.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree.
Exactly.
It still hasn't been exhausted.
Yeah.
Or fully explored.
Exactly. Right. So then, so I think about like teaching music lessons, and I think it would be really something to get to that point where we're not thinking about this is the way that Western music works, this is how you play a tempered scale, but maybe understanding something more about like this is everything we've been talking about, this is the energetic dynamic of this moment, this is the energy that's at play, these are the vibrations that correspond to that energy, or these are the vibrations that energy creates, and how are you going to express that on a musical instrument?
That's true.
So, but I think, we're headed into a time we're gonna need to start building new instruments and all, right? If you start thinking about music in totally different ways, if you start reconceiving the way that music is put together, then you're gonna have to start changing the instruments that you use, right? We're using a bunch of instruments that are made for tempered music, but if you want to temper the music in a different way, you're gonna have to build different instruments, or just prefer certain instruments over others, certain instruments that allow the flexibility to get into these other realms,
Oh, you're right. I see real change.
Yeah.
Don't know how we're going to get there, but
yeah,
it's fascinating.
Yeah.
And
it just gets there from studying and experimenting.
They're working on it now.
Yeah.
They really
Exactly.
are. We just don't know when they're going to get to the new thing.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're working on it here.
You are.
Slowly but surely. We're working on it here. Just keep plucking away at it. So, you were talking about 10 years from now, and I think 10 years from now is going to be I think that's when things are going to kind of settle into something here in a major way.
Right.
I think there's really going to be something to show for everything that we've been talking about, but I think it's probably going to be like 40 years from now when this stuff actually starts really coming together in a meaningful way that's like, that can be passed on to, right? Because that's part of the whole thing is like, we could do all these things and, be experimental and fringy, right? Like in a way, we're just kind of experimental and fringy, and there's a history of people being experimental and fringy and not really catching on, and not really having something that can be passed on,
No,
that's such a major part of actually being able to make a difference. You have to have something that can be passed on to people, have something that can be learned in a way, and something that can be understood, So
no, that's true.
Yeah. I think only time's gonna tell.
I
Only
know.
time will tell on that front, So
Well, 10 years, Peyton.
yeah.
You just have to take it out and take a look at it and see where you are
Mm-hmm.
and how far you've come, and did you go in the direction you wanted, or maybe you didn't explore everything completely and you want to go back here. You just don't know.
Yeah.
But it's very, very interesting I mean, there's so many places you can go, and I have no idea. I mean, as far as other instruments, I can see that. You know, you can just see a lot of other doors opening up.
Yeah.
That we wouldn't even consider right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're already, Onyx is one of the people to me that's like, he's really, really at the forefront of this kind of thing right now, right? Onyx Ashanti is this cat who lives in Detroit, and he's, in a way, he's building his own new instrument now, and this instrument is an exoskeleton. He's building a whole exoskeleton that's like sonifying his body movements, And stuff, it's incredible. It's sonifying his body movements. It's outfitted with all these other, what's the word? It has things like there are infrared lights in it, because he was like interested in photobiomodulation, and it's all these different things in there that are affecting change, so. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
You just don't know what they're going to create.
Yeah.
But I think it's wonderful that they're trying to do something different, new. Even if you go back and you take some of the old stuff.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot that can be done.
Yeah.
It just takes, the vision and the will to find it.
Yeah. Definitely.
Okay.
Sounds good. Well, thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is fascinating.
Yeah.
I can't wait to, see what happens in 10 years if I'm still here.
Oh, I think you're still going to be here.
Yeah. And, it'll just be fascinating to see where you go, because in the short time you've been here, you've really come so far.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there was a time where people wouldn't have wanted to come in here at all.
Yeah, I mean, I remember coming to see the house and thinking, man, this is rough.
And now it's almost like, I think you're right on the cusp of people knocking at the door and saying, "Can I come?
Yeah.
Can I be a part of it?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And which is fascinating.
Yeah.
And you've really brought together a lot of very, very interesting people. So I love that.
Yeah.
I think it's cool.
Yeah.
And I've watched the progression of things here, and it's always changing, and it's always attractive.
Yeah.
It attracts a lot of people, and
Yeah.
even Solly thinks so.
Yeah. Yep.
Such a character.
He is. He certainly is. Cool. Well, thank you, Catherine.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
We've got, I still have many things, but I won't push you to go into everything.
Yeah. Maybe it's for episode 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just see there are so many pieces of this. There are people, there are, concrete pieces of it, like the grounds, the buildings, what your vision is for those things, and what your goals are for those things.
Yeah.
And certainly when you look back and you see what it was,
Yeah.
and how it's really changed. And I mean, the fact that you have Adobe on the walls,
Yeah.
it's not what one would ever have expected.
Right.
And and the bottles, I mean, it's
Right.
just astonishing.
Yeah.
And again, that's part of your vision.
Yeah. But in a way, I didn't really expect it either. It was just it was what felt right in the moment. So.
Did it? Is that how you got there?
In a lot of ways, yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Adobe started because I went to this spot in Boston called the Cloud Club, and I played there, and it was like, it's like an aging hippie that owns the buildings, and he was renovating them over decades. But he'd done all this work in there with plaster, and he was making these like really cool forms inside the house. He would make these kind of, bone-shaped alcoves at the corner where the wall met the floor, and like do this on the side of the stairs and have lights in it. And he had these little like, I don't know, they were almost like moon caves in the corner of some of the rooms, and you could like go in and have tea or something, and I found out that they were made from plaster, and I didn't know what plaster was, so I just started looking into it, and I started doing some work with gypsum plaster in the city and checking that out, but I didn't really like working with it that much because it,
sets up so fast.
Right, you mix it and you have a rock after like 5 minutes. So it's like, well, this is kind of dumb. I need more time.
But it's very interesting just to look around here. It is very unconventional.
Yeah.
You see the outside of the house and you kind of get a sense, and then you come in here and it's vastly different.
Yeah.
But I love it.
Yeah.
And I think that your creativity in using the Adobe is just wild.
Yeah.
And the bottles, I love the bottles. They're pretty.
Yeah. I mean, it's been fun. Even going to the dump and collecting bottles. You meet a lot of great people at the dump.
Don't you?
Yeah.
I love it.
Yep.
I really do.
Yep. Yeah.
But that's all part of what is the attraction too. It is.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, this cat thinks differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not, it looks very conventional from the outside, and then you get in here and it's not.
It's only because I haven't touched the outside yet. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, still gotta finish the, some of the stuff upstairs first.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Speaking of upstairs, did you get the plywood that you needed?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I used your technique, but I did it in the rain. Got the plywood strapped into the roof of the turbo. Man, it was raining so much, and I was like messing around with the ratchet straps. I was like, man, I gotta get out of here. This stuff is getting soaked. I ended up just having just one strap, front to back. I was like, this will hold. I won't make any crazy turns.
No, it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and I set it all up in the living room with the dehumidifier for half an hour.
Perfect.
Yeah, and got it all set up there. So
you're getting there, Peyton. You're getting there.
Yeah,
I love it.
Go up and show you. So
yes, this is really gorgeous.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in here on cyberspace in our corner of the internet.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like we might have to do a part 2.
I think so, and it is going to change. It's changing.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. It's always changed because this is becoming
growing.
An ecosystem.
It is.
So the stuff is changing all the time, and that's part of why I wanted to do this podcast too. When Brian texted me, I was like, man, you're right.
He was thoughtful. It was a thoughtful idea.
Yeah, we gotta just kind of document everything and keep it.
I agree.
Keep stuff archived, and see where we've been. What did I think I was gonna do when I was 20?
I think that's true.
Yeah.
And I think, when I try to imagine this in 10 years, I can't.
Yeah.
At all. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind trying to think about what you'll be doing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it'll be. I think it's interesting to me, like when I'm 60 or something, and go back and be like, that was a terrible idea. I should never have even thought of that. We're probably doing many a thing that.
Or
I've
if
never
you go
thought
back
of now,
and you look at this podcast,
yeah,
you'll laugh your ass off.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll be like, what was I thinking?
Yeah, exactly.
Because things really, really can change profoundly in a very short period of time. And I think that it's already changed.
Yeah.
Tremendously.
Yeah. Oh, it totally has.
In a really positive way,
Totally
but still.
It totally has.
You know, when you look at just the people
Yeah.
that are coming in now, the musicians that come in now, and what you attempt to do is, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So I love it.
Yeah.
Your father and mother must go, oiks.
Yeah. I think they like it. And they appreciate it.
I think they do too. They're interesting people, so.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. But
Cool.
I bet they couldn't have predicted this.
Probably not. Yeah, probably not.
No, I love it.
Yeah.
I think what you're doing is fantastic, and you just keep at it.
Yeah. Thanks, Catherine.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I'll help however I can.